30 seconds.
Is it showing up?
No, 20 seconds.
Just 1 second. I have to do like 2 separate things. I'm good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, guys. I am Isaac Yepes, the recruitment officer for the UTEP College Republicans. Thank you for joining us. This is the last iteration of the Unfiltered series for the fall semester. We are here with Some Dumb American. She is an up-and-coming YouTuber. She is very nice to both sides, I think. She calls them out when they're being unfair to each other, and that's caught her some flack from the anti-social justice community. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys today?
We're doing really good. A little tired from finals, but you know, we got a whole week to go. Let's jump right into this. So you just did a video on when leftists attack, and this video captures a guy being harassed by 2 presumably social justice advocates about his shirt. It was just a hashtag Build That Wall shirts.
Yeah.
Can you fill us in on the details of that and how he reacted?
So what ended up happening was he was, from what I can tell, was just in his apartment building, and he was wearing a Build the Wall shirt. And these people started harassing him, and he asked them to go away, and they didn't go away. And that kind of happened. And some criticism that I've gotten for that is that if you wear a shirt that's kind of inflammatory, you should expect people to say something to you, which is fine. I understand that. But I also think that if you specifically ask somebody to leave you alone, then I don't really think it matters what you're wearing. So that's pretty much that whole situation.
So what is your take on the way he handled it? I mean, he's obviously a pacifist because he could have done a lot of the things and he didn't. How well do you think that works in everyday life? Because this did look to be a bigger fellow, so to speak.
Well, I think fortunately most people wouldn't have to deal with something like this. I don't think that most social justice warriors would actually bitch at you in real life. I think it's probably going to be taking pictures of you and posting it online if they say anything at all, or saying a story and embellishing it or something like that. So I think it's kind of rare that you actually have them come up to you and harass you. But of course, we have seen that happen. I think it's best to just let them make themselves look like the assholes, because if you do something back, then it's super easy to spin it. And just from a PR perspective, I think if you can influence the way that people see you, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and we saw this with the Mike Pence versus the Hamilton cast, where they came out and basically wagged their fingers at him, and he didn't have much of a retort. Now, both sides seem to have done some really dumb stuff on this, and with the left, it was, well, yeah, he's the end of the world for the LGBT community. And for the right, it was, you know, how dare you do this? Well, let's be inflammatory back. So can you elaborate on your grievances with both sides about this?
So my grievances with the Hamilton cast, first of all, is not that they said something to him. They're allowed to say something to the vice president. I think that it is totally justified. I think you should say stuff to your public officials. My issue came with what they accused him of. That he had just paid probably thousands of dollars ahead of time to get into this play, and then for them to assume that he doesn't have their best interest at heart. I don't think he's done anything as the vice president-elect to give anybody that idea, and I don't think that accusing him of doing that is the right thing to do. I think if you want to say something, you just say, like, I hope that you serve the country fairly and that you are fair to the American people. And I think that makes more sense. Now, that being said, if he does something during his term as vice president that is bad and that is racist or that is homophobic, then fine, absolutely criticize that. But when he hasn't done anything like that, serving as vice president, and we have no real reason to believe that he will, then I think you should give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, on the other side, of course, we had the people in Chicago yelling at the Hamilton cast in Chicago. And if you know anything about plays, you know that the Hamilton cast in Chicago is not the same as the Hamilton cast in New York. And that guy got forcibly removed from the show, which he should have. It's rude. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to behave that way in the theater. You're supposed to be very respectful to the actors and things like that. So he got removed, and then one of the cast members cried, which I also thought, again, that's stupid too. I think that's ridiculous. There's no reason to cry. It's just some idiot who's going to get removed. So the only person that handled that situation in a way that made any sense at all was Mike Pence. He was very gracious to them. He didn't freak out. He didn't, go on a Twitter tirade that Trump always goes on. I really wish he would stop tweeting sometimes. And he was really respectful about it. And so I thought that he came out of that looking like the person with actually having a head on his shoulder. So, which is good for him. Now, and that's my whole take on it.
Yeah, with that, we actually saw something interesting happen, which is Trump asked or demanded that the cast apologize. And then we had figures like Paul Joseph Watson saying that this should be a safe space. And then you have the left criticizing the right, rightfully so, for saying, it's not a safe space. What are you talking about? So you start to see this consolidation of principles for power. Now, I think we've seen this now more than ever with the Trump v. Clinton presidential race. Sorry about that. Now, what's your take on that? Do you think everybody is starting to sell out just so that they can get more power?
No, I think part of it is that, and I don't feel like it was articulated particularly well, but my take on it is that I think they mean that if you pay for a service, then, that service should be, like, you should get that service that you've paid for. If you've paid to see a movie, you should get to see the movie. And I guess their opinion is that the movie shouldn't then yell at you. And I think they want to apply that same logic to a play. And I don't think that if the Hamilton cast meant what they said, I don't think they should apologize. The thing that drives me the most, like the craziest, is when people are not sorry, but then they apologize just because they feel like they need to. If you're not sorry, if you meant it, don't apologize. That's how I feel. Even if I disagree with you, if you're not sorry, then don't be sorry. Stick to your principles. But I think it has more to do with politeness and with honoring the fact that someone has spent thousands of dollars to take their children and their family to see you perform. I think that's more of it. And there's also a thing in like theater culture, because I did like theater in school like everybody else, where if you go to a musical theater, you don't take out your phone, you shut up, you get there on time. Like if you're not there on time, they don't let you in. You don't disturb the performance. So there's also just a class of etiquette that I think is applied there as well. But I did think that they overreacted to it.
Yeah, and speaking of overreactions, the student from Miami University, he had a bit of a tussle with Milo Yiannopoulos, a verbal tussle. He called him a white supremacist, and when questioned about it, Milo went on the offensive, and he said, "How dare you? Where's your evidence for this?" And the guy kept saying, "Well, you're enabling them. You're on a platform that emboldens them." Now, do you think it's effective to go on the offensive, or do you think it's better to be, I guess, more polite and show people the other cheek?
It depends on the situation. In that situation, I think he had every right to go on the offensive. I know I would. If somebody were to call me a white supremacist and say that I enable white supremacy, I would be really annoyed with that, and I would probably, say, "Where's your evidence to prove that? Please prove that I'm a white supremacist." And I don't care what the alt-right does. I don't care if the alt-right has a white supremacist piece to it. That's not my fault. And I don't think it is Milo's fault. I don't think it's any popular conservative commentator's fault that they're white supremacists. with a rise in black supremacy, you're going to get a counter rise in white supremacy. And on the bright side, the white supremacists have no power. And I think it should stay that way. If you're a race supremacist, you suck and you're an idiot. I don't care if you're a Chinese supremacist or a white supremacist or a black supremacist. Nobody who's racist should actually have power. But to say that he is a white supremacist and that he enables white supremacy, I think is silly. And I think it kind of goes back to the fact that social justice warriors and people on the aggressive left see Black Lives Matter as black people. So if you're if you are criticizing Black Lives Matter, if you're criticizing their message, their actions, and you're criticizing black people, and they don't have this ability to separate the person's race from their actual thoughts and from this movement. And I think that's their problem, is that they, if you are black, then you're automatically think like this, and you automatically are in this group. You're automatically protesting for Black Lives Matter, and you are under direct attack just because of the color of your skin. And that's just not the case.
So we actually talked about this a couple weeks ago with Blonde in the Belly of the Beast. She and I spoke about the conflation that the left likes to do a lot, where they don't separate color from the person or identity from the individual. They throw everything into collective boxes. Now, you mentioned the inability to separate the ideology from the person. Do you think this lack of ability to take away the individual ego from an argument is part of the reason why the right has been losing arguments up until Trump's sudden victory?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
So the inability to separate the ego from the argument, do you think that is part of the reason why the left lost and the right had been losing before that? Because the left seems to think that, well, this must be the type of person that agrees with this sentiment. This must be their argument. And their inability to separate the individuals that do agree with a certain sentiment, but not the caricature that they want them to, their inability to do that is why they've misunderstood the American people.
Yeah, I think so. And you can actually see with what they've done with white women. So prior to Trump's election, I was one of the people who the left wanted to protect, but now since I'm white and I'm a woman, they hate me because Trump won because white women suck. So they seem to see you as a collective, and even if you're a white woman who was against Trump, you still suck because, well, you're a white woman, and that's why Trump won, because you didn't convince enough other white women to not vote for Trump. And so it's actually kind of interesting when they flip it on you, because the other half of white women voted for Hillary Clinton, but so they see this. It's interesting how they see this as such a deep betrayal. And it's kind of funny because you have all these white women going, oh my God, white women, I can't believe they would do this. And you're just like, I didn't know that we had to all agree on stuff. And it's this crazy thing, because I made a video about this the other day too, where this guy that I knew in high school was like, am I allowed to like Ivanka Trump? And everybody was like, no. And I was just, are you kidding me? Like, you're not allowed to like somebody because of their political opinions? I mean, unless they're a blatant racist or a blatant sexist, or, they want to kill people or something like that, then I don't understand why a slight disagreement would be that upsetting to you. And I think that's the other reason why they're so out of touch. Because to them, if you are slightly right-wing, then you hate anybody who's not white. Then, you hate gay people. You hate women. You think that women should stay in the kitchen. All this stuff. And because of that, they are so stuck in their bubble that they just don't know what anybody actually thinks.
Yeah, they put us into a bunch of, I guess, a collective of straw men. You know, and obviously I just can't stand myself. When you mentioned the list of things that are kind of or intolerable for the, or indefensible for the left, they've added global warming denier or climate change denier to that. And to that argument, I always wonder, why is it that the government should be the end-all solution for this problem? It's lethargic as it is, and giving it more money is not going to make it better. So what is your take on climate change and its solution?
Okay. So I'm getting an echo actually right now. Okay, it's gone. Okay, so obviously nobody wants the planet to suck, and nobody wants the planet to be overrun with, you know, fossil fuels and you can't breathe and stuff like that. But I don't agree with the narrative or the politicizing of global warming and politicizing of climate change, because as a matter of fact, in the US, we have done so much to police our own manufacturing methods, and we have more forests than we did 100 years ago, and we are developing cleaner energy every day. And these leftists that want to protect the environment are protesting a pipeline, and pipelines are state of the art. They're the safest way to transport oil, and whether we like it or not right now, we have to use oil, and we should be using the most state of the art technology. If you really want to help climate change, the best things that we can do is pretty much crash China's economy and get manufacturing back over here, where we actually have regulations and where we actually give a shit about the environment. So, like, you know, and unfortunately, if Donald Trump and it would take decades, we can get into this later, but if you eventually were to get all the manufacturing back into first world countries, that's how you fix climate change, because we actually have standards. They don't.
Yeah, and speaking of the outcry, we saw the same thing. This is a bit of an old story, but Milo the lion, or is it Cecil the lion?
Yeah, Cecil the lion.
Yeah, well, he got all shut up, and the leftists were crying foul about it. But then it was, I think it was Radiolab that did a story on it, and they said it's actually the hunters that are the reason why these safaris are growing, and the population of these animals is growing because they hunt the green-lit animals, and they're the only ones putting in money to these programs that help them survive. And the liberal argument was, well, how can you put a price on a life, or something like that? And it seems to be that they don't want to live in the real world. They want it to be a utopia where nothing has to die. Nobody should have to really pay for anything, because, you know, they're not putting money into it. So do you think that we can actually get change done without the public sector? Do you think that's a realistic thing? Because I know that's a libertarian view, but it's also utopian.
Well, I'm not a libertarian, so I think that you need to have structure. I think that there needs to be a skeleton for the rest of everything to go on. And I think without at least some form of federal government, you don't get that cohesion, and I think everything would fall apart. That being said, I don't think you need a massive government, and I think the government is fit to handle some things more than it's fit to handle other things. So, you know, I think that with climate change, I think that you do need some sort of, you know, regulation, some sort of standard. You know, I think there needs to be some sort of standard that you hold businesses to and things like that. The other thing is that the other criticism that Donald Trump gets right now, because of his policies for manufacturing and getting companies back over here and keeping them here, is that it's not totally free trade. And that's true. It is not free trade. And that's because the world is not a perfect place. I don't know if you've noticed something about white people, but we have living standards. So it's more expensive to employ us. Whereas in Southeast Asia, they don't have living standards. Anything above their dirt hut is fantastic. And they're actually moving factories out of China because the Chinese people have become industrialized. there's a middle class, and now they actually want money, and you can't just pay them in mud. So, you know, it's when you live in a staggered world, I don't think that free trade works quite as well as you want it to. And I think that you do need those government interferences for stuff like that to make it work. Mm-hmm. Because left on its own, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and you know, with that, you get things like copyright. Now, a famous YouTuber who you've had a helping hand from, Bearing, he just recently ran into that. And I saw something very interesting with this interaction. With the extreme left, they were saying, you know, haha, in your face, you got what you deserved. And then on the right, they're all blaming it on the left without any evidence. It was just, oh, this must be the YouTube Heroes thing in action. But then we saw, oh, it's actually a legitimate copyright claim that was given to him. So could you give me your thoughts on that?
So I'll admit my first reaction was that it was a completely unfounded copyright claims and that it was a YouTube hero type thing in action. And I think the reason for that is that is what they have done to people, or what they have tried to do to people. To be honest with you, I don't see that happening en masse the way that they might claim that it has. You know, I know they purged a bunch of alt-right accounts from Twitter, and I think that they unfairly suspended Milo, more or less to just set an example and, you know, say this is what happens. But I don't think we've seen these massive attacks on people like parts of my community have said. I don't think we've seen that yet, and I think people are paranoid about it happening. And so I think that's why me and everybody else jumped to that conclusion. But as much as I would love to defend Bearing, it's the same bear, and they have a legitimate claim. There's nothing I can do about that. The copyright holders submitted the claim, and they have a claim, and, you know, it is what it is. I think that he should have been properly notified, and I think that he should have been given a chance to correct the problem, which he now has. I think he's getting like new avatars and stuff like that, which I think is a good thing to do. But, you know, I think the assumption that it was the left came from what the left has actually done to people, or what they've tried to do, and the systems that they've put in place for that to be abused. Now, like I said, I haven't seen as many coordinated efforts to do some of that stuff as some people might have you believe, but the tools are there. The animosity is there when they want it to be. So I don't think that their assumption was totally unjustified. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I think it's totally fair to assume that when a large YouTuber who has been continuously attacked for being a bully goes down on copyright pretenses, I think that you have every right to assume that it might be that. I mean, in this case, it was wrong, but in most cases, it probably wouldn't be an incorrect assumption.
I mean, that's fair enough. You've created such a stereotype of yourself. You've become a parody, and even when people assume wrongly, it's, well, not entirely baseless. Now, a viewer has just asked you to talk about the leftists and their hilarious reactions to Fidel Castro's death. I guess they're pointing to what just happened with the UN. I think they had a moment of silence to mourn him.
Oh, did they?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gross.
Some organization. It might have been the EU.
Fidel Castro sucked, and he was an ass. He was a communist dictator, and he got a bunch of people killed. He put gays in labor camps. So if you call yourself a leftist, if you think that you're on the left and you're for liberal ideas and liberal principles, and you know you like gay people and stuff like that, and you also like Fidel Castro, then that's a direct contradiction to your views.
Yeah, I really don't think there's much else to be said about it, because it just seemed antithetical to the liberal agenda, as it should be. But more and more, I'm seeing people like Trudeau and Obama and these left-leaning officials do crazy things in the name of this guy who was a butcher of his own people and subjugated them to some of the worst treatment in the West, well, geographically speaking. But so moving on from that, we had the hipster butcher from OSU. And I say hipster because it seems like he did all of this ironically. You know, he said, I can't stand the way they're stereotyping us in the media, and then he goes out and acts out the stereotype. So the media, even though he had posted the day before about his motives, they said motives still unclear. What do you think of it? Do you think that's being dishonest, or do you think that's waiting for the facts to come in?
Okay, so I guess this sort of gets into the difference between being, you know, a news source and being a political commentator, because both work in media. So if you're a political commentator, I think it's perfectly fine to make assumptions based on what you know. So Black Somali guy who posted on Facebook, it's pretty clear that this was a terrorist attack. It fits the prototype for terrorist attacks and the precedent set in Europe, where they take vehicles and they run people over and then chase them with knives because they don't have guns. So I think if you're a political commentator, you're more likely to jump to that conclusion. Whereas if you're like a news anchor, I think it makes more sense to say the motive is unclear until the investigation is completed. I think people who are supposed to be unbiased have a duty to do that. So I don't think it's crazy that the media would say, you know, the investigation's not over. We don't know yet for sure, or there hasn't been a verdict on that. So that's more or less my opinion on it.
Yeah, I guess I've just turned so violently against the left-leaning media because every other word out of their mouth seems to be really dishonest and misleading. But I guess that would be a fair take, is to just wait for the facts to come out instead of jumping to conclusions like we saw with, I think it was the San Bernardino shootings, where I think someone like Tariq Nasheed had posted, oh, I knew it was white men all along, and it turned out to be two Muslims or something. Speaking of Tariq Nasheed, he just said something crazy the other day, and you mentioned it on one of your videos. Do you recall what that was?
Yeah, he said that he racialized the whole thing and was like, the white guy who shot this Black Somali guy is being hailed as a hero. How interesting. He said that. And yeah, he's crazy. He also said that Cubans are white supremacists. So he's a little bit of a nut job, and that is what it is.
Wow, that's a new one. I honestly can't believe anyone would have said that. Do you think that is in response to Florida turning red this election?
No, I don't know if he's making that many connections in his brain, to be honest with you. I just think he thinks that everywhere that's not Africa is white supremacist. Because I've listened to him talk, and he's one of those people that you can listen to him talk all day, and he's never actually said anything. So it's kind of hard to actually get a feel for what his opinions on things are. I really can't tell.
Yeah, well, speaking of a lack of substance, you had a run-in with the Atheist Gamer, and he is, I think, an example of people trying to make it on YouTube and failing miserably because they don't really adhere to what the people actually want. They just kind of mimic and exaggerate what they see. Now, what is your take on YouTube and your philosophy to making videos and why you make videos?
Well, I think I said this to you off air, but I really enjoy public speaking, and I've always liked doing it. I've always been politically aware and politically involved and stuff like that. So that's why I started making YouTube videos. And my take on it is that if you want to make it big, you either have to get lucky and go super viral, or you have to slowly build your way up. And unfortunately, if you don't have at least a little bit of talent, if you don't have at least a little bit of personality, if you're socially awkward or something like that, you're going to have a much tougher time making it in the public sphere as being a public figure. You just are. So, and I think that's mostly that's most of his problem. You can't fix socially awkward. And, there's nothing you can do about that. So, to make it on YouTube, like I said, you have to have some semblance of some kind of talent for it. You have to be able to make at least somewhat good quality videos, or at least make the sound good. As long as it sounds good, that's pretty much it. As long as you're not making people's ears bleed, you're pretty good. And I also think it has to do with what you do differently from other people. So if you're trying to copycat somebody, it doesn't work. I think Bering went super viral because he was very different from like Sargon, who has a very different style of video making. So I think it's all about your personality and that kind of stuff, and just the amount of exposure that you're able to get.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been doing YouTube exactly?
Okay, so I started in May of 2015, and I took a break until starting at about October, I think it was, of 2015. I took a break, and then I came back in May of 2016, and I've been doing it consistently since then.
Nice. And when you talk about the, I guess, the personality or what you bring to the table, why do you think it is that some of these guys, I won't really name names, but they seem to have created an echo chamber? And while I may agree with some of the things that they say, there's no critical analysis. So do you think there's some substance to saying that demagoguery is more viable than critical analysis, something like Till Deer does, where he takes something and just deconstructs it until he can explain it to you point by point?
That's a hard question to answer, because I think it's like I said, it all has to do with your personality. I mean, if you've got a great personality and you're really entertaining to watch, then doing critical analysis, Jeff Holiday is a good friend of mine, and he's a great YouTuber, and he does critical analysis, and his channel is blowing up because he's just super fun to watch, and he's got a really nice voice, and he's really interesting to watch, and he puts a lot of time and effort into his videos. So again, I think it depends on your personality, what you can pull off. So I think it just depends on the person. If you can do critical analysis and make it not boring, then you can do that. But I also think it's super easy to, for someone who maybe is not politically active, or someone who maybe isn't the best at constructing arguments, I think it's really easy for them to go buy a microphone, get an avatar, and just start making videos, and maybe they don't actually have the ability to argue, or the ability to to have conversations or to expand on their points. Maybe they've just got the talking points down, and that is what it is. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but there's a bunch of different styles of, I guess you could call it, anti-SJW YouTuber, and it just depends on what fits for you and what's going to go viral.
Now, on the other side of things, you've had quite a few run-ins with Milo Stewart and Riley. I don't know his last name.
Riley Dennis, yeah.
Yeah. Now these two, they focus heavily on transgender perspective and things like that. And they've addressed some criticism of being what they call trenders. Now, you recently made a video about Leave Riley Alone.
Yeah.
Now, can you divulge some of that information, like what exactly you meant by this, and the Twitter rant that Riley made?
Well, in case some people don't know, the Leave Riley Alone thing was just like, it was a joke, kind of back to the viral video that was like, leave Britney alone, whatever. It was just sort of a joke. But her whole thing was that people are not nice enough to her, him, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. And that, you know, he wants them to leave him alone. And my issue with that is you put out a channel and you put out information that is factually incorrect. And I said this in my video about trigger warnings that was sort of piggybacking off of Barring's video that he did on Milo Stewart. You know, this person is an adult and he is encouraging people who are children, essentially, to do this kind of stuff. And he's filling their brains with information. And in my opinion, and this is coming from someone who, while I was 15, while I was 16, I was severely depressed. I've since been successfully treated for the past 3.5 years, but I was so much more susceptible to things like feminism and, you know, I was even talked into being non-binary for about 2 months. And when you're depressed and when you like hate yourself and you hate the world and you think everything's out to get you, you are so much more susceptible to these ideas. And in my opinion, most of the people who are, you know, who are non-binary, who are feminists, who are these crazy sexualities, I think that they all have severe depression, and I think they all need to be put on some pills and not hormone pills. I think they're very unhappy, unsatisfied people, and I say that as someone who was there, and I can just see it. You know, I can see that desire to be special. I can see that desire, you know, to want to be unique and to want to be popular for being unique and to want to be different and all that kind of stuff. And it's just these very childish behaviors that people who are severely depressed display. So, and I think that's what it is. But yeah, I think that they're just depressed. And I think they're preying on other people who are probably severely depressed. And I don't know if they know it or not, to be honest with you. I really don't. I think that they are correct. And I think that they're right. But hopefully someday they get put on pills and they're like, oh, shit. Because that's what happened to me. You know, after I got better, after I wasn't depressed anymore, after I'd been successfully treated for about a year, I looked back and I was like, whew, okay, that was crazy. And I think that that's what happens when you grow up, when you mature, when you are more emotionally mature, when you don't have these issues anymore, when you don't post things on Tumblr that say, like, I just want to die and nobody loves me, stuff like that, because that's these people. You have to understand that those are these people. And if you're an adult who is still in that, you know, depressed, angsty teenager state, I have nothing for them but sympathy. That sucks. I'm sorry that your life sucks that bad. And you're an adult. I'm glad that I was able to get out of it before I had to actually go get a job and had to be in the real world.
Mm. And do you think a lot of these people are sheltered from it in one way or another? Or do you think it's a willing, I guess, a willing ignorance of the outside world? Because a lot of it honestly seems like they haven't thought through their arguments a lot of the time. I remember watching the Satirician when he first started. And, I mean, he would debunk these arguments in a couple minutes. And, I mean, it was a quick change of 2 words or, hey, have you ever actually thought about what the worldview would look like if everyone thought this way? Or, you know, what are you doing here?
I'm not sure. I know that they're probably aware of the dissenting opinions, partially because somebody with a dissenting opinion will come and yell at you, but also because in order to arrive at the conclusion that they've arrived at, they have to know about the other side. And I honestly, just like I said, from personal experience, I think that they just think that they have this knowledge that other people don't have. And like, you just haven't had that enlightenment moment yet. I'm pretty sure that they all think that they just walk around with like halo beacons that say Enlighten 1 on them and stuff like that. And so I honestly think, and like I said, just from personal experience, that is the way that they see the world, that other people think this, but they just don't know yet. They just haven't figured it out. And eventually they'll figure it out and they'll become one of the enlightened ones. And I think that's how they create their echo chamber, because they don't have to listen to your dissenting opinion because you just haven't been enlightened yet. You just don't know about it yet. So I think that's how they keep it up.
I think you're misusing some words here. It's woke right there. They get woke or whatever it is. Okay, so we have another question. What about Angela Merkel banning the burqa? Is it too little too late, or does it even pertain to what the German people want?
I mean, I think she's kind of fucked up already, but so a burqa ban makes sense for me, not because of Islam, but just because I think it makes sense. In most places, it's actually, especially in the US, illegal to have your face completely covered anyway. And so I don't think you would be able to wear a burqa here. And I don't think you should be able to just walk around with your face completely covered. But so from that standpoint, I get it. I think it is too little too late. I think she's already fucked up. She's, it's how does it feel to ruin Europe for the third time in a century? Germany. Like, how do you feel about that? Good job.
I think we're good.
Okay. I honestly think that we should just build a wall around Germany and tell them to just shut the fuck up, stop it for about a century, and then see if later we can let them out of timeout.
A countrywide timeout.
Yeah, they need it. They so need it.
Now, okay, so the opposing argument is you're taking away the women's freedom to choose to wear this article of clothing. Now, where do you stand on that?
Well, most Muslims don't even wear a burqa anyway. And again, I don't think that you should be able to walk around with your face completely covered. But I think Islam needs what Christianity needed, which was a revolution and an enlightenment. There needs to be an Islamic enlightenment. I've taken a world religions class, and we were talking in our last section was Islam, and there was a girl who was from somewhere, I don't know where, but she had an accent, and she's Muslim, and she's like, ISIS isn't, they're not Muslim. They say that they represent Islam, and they don't. And they need to stop that. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think any Christian would say that the Westboro Baptist Church isn't Christian. They are. They just suck.
Yeah.
And Christians are super quick to divorce themselves from them. Not to play the No True Scotsman card, but just to be like, no, fuck you. And I think Muslims need to actually do that. I think they need to say, yeah, they're Muslim. And they need to acknowledge that there are parts of the Quran that say that, Islam is all about compassion. It totally is. It's all about compassion. But part of the problem is that compassion extends to, if someone is gay and they can't be fixed, the compassionate thing to do is to kill them.
Yeah, preferably off the roof.
Right. And so they have to acknowledge these problems, and they won't. They just say, well, it's not Islam. It is Islam. And this is what has happened. And you need to actually revolutionize your religion. So that's how I feel about it. And look, if you want to wear a headscarf, that's fine. I don't really care. But I do think that they need to, wake up and realize that these people are Muslims, and that there literally is doctrine in Islam that is leading these people to where they're going, and they are following the doctrine as exact as you possibly can.
Yeah, well,
and it's important to say, hey, our doctrine might be a little bit outdated. That's an important admission.
Yeah, and if you read the hadiths, it's even more vicious and brutal. I mean, the amount of passages in those things that call for the cutting of cutting at the neck of non-believers or unbelievers, I think they're called, until they yield, and if they don't yield, cut it off. It's very alarming. And the fact that I think ISIS follows it to the T is what these I guess no true Scotsman people are failing to acknowledge.
Right. So what you have to say is, okay, this is where it says this is where we're getting it from, and it's time to throw this doctrine out. You know, that's what a lot of Christians have done, because most of them don't have a problem with gay people anymore, which is a really good thing. I'm happy. I live in the South, and over my lifetime, I have seen that change, and I'm really happy about it. And I've even seen it slightly because while I was still working in a bar, I went to work after the Orlando shooting, and there was there was an old guy and his wife sitting in a booth, and you know, the guy was like, I heard that this Muslim went and shot all them queers. I don't know about them queers, but I don't like that. And I was like, you know what? If you're okay with them not getting shot, it's, you know, it's a step in the right direction. You know, this guy's probably not going to become super comfortable with flamboyantly gay guys, but you know, I think it's an American sentiment that our people don't get shot by other people. And so even though he's not like super on board with it, to see him share that sentiment, I think for me, that's enough. I know that for the rest of the regressive left, it's not enough. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's enough that somebody can say, like, I don't like these people, but they're Americans and, you know, they should be protected here and stuff like that. So I guess I'm kind of on another tangent, but I think that the regressive left has expectations that are way too high. You know, I should be able to wear whatever I want and people have to like it. It's like, no. You should be able to wear whatever you want and people do not have to like it. Or, you know, I should be able to be fat and not be bullied. Okay. And people have to like it. No. And so I think that it's not enough for them to actually be free. They have to also be not only accepted, but loved. Because, you know, even if a person's like, well, I don't really care if you're gay or it doesn't affect me, but, you know, I'm not comfortable with it. So even if this person is generally accepting, it's not enough. And I think that if you accept that that's enough, I think that you actually win more people over and get them closer to your side than if you just shout at them, well, that's not enough, you have to like it. Mm-hmm. I think that if you start encroaching on people's free will and what they like and they don't like and what they're comfortable with and not comfortable with, I think you turn a lot of people off, and I think that you make them go back the other way. I'm sorry, that got like super tangenty, but you know, I think that's part of their problem. I think that's why people don't like them anymore.
Yeah, and don't worry about the tangents. That's exactly why you're here. Now, back onto Islam. If they do have reformations and radical reformations, just like the Christian church in the early centuries, a lot of people will die. It's just, there's no way around it. Now, what do you think the UN's response will be if that happens?
Okay, so this kind of goes into my thoughts on the Middle East. Let me just start there. So I get that Donald Trump wants to defeat ISIS, and don't get me wrong, I want to see their scummy butts dead too. I get it. But at the same time, if we go in and we attack ISIS and we beat them, then what? We can't leave because then there's a power vacuum and then another ISIS comes. That's exactly what happened last time. And I think that the only thing that we can do is defend the West. I think the West needs to come together as a place of, you know, upstanding moral values. We value freedom. I think you're allowed to say, yes, we are better than you because we protect our gay people, we protect women, and we have these freedoms for people. I think you have to accept that our society is better than theirs. And I think you have to let them progress on their own, because the more that we go in and kill off regimes, the more this cycle is going to happen. I think that if we get rid of ISIS, you know, something else is going to have to fill that void. So unless you want a complete occupation of the Middle East forever, you're going to have to, you know, you have to let it go. And that's also why it's so important for us to be dependent on our own oil, because part of the reason why we stay there is so that we still have interest there. And I think if you get the interest out of there, it's a lot easier to leave. And I think we should leave. I get that there are good people there. I understand that. I really do. But there's nothing that we can do about that, in my opinion. You can't, you can't do that. And as much as I am pro-Israel, I think it was a mistake to inject them into that situation. I think it was asking for trouble. I don't think that they have any right, and because it happened via treaty, so I don't think that they have any right to try to wipe them off the map. But I think it's more trouble than it's worth, which is hard to explain to people who are deeply religious, because that's their holy site. So it's hard to say, maybe this was a bad idea. If you would like, we can saw the island, we can saw it off and just kind of float it down the Mediterranean maybe and help you out there. They don't want to do that. And I think that's part of the problem. I think you have to hands off. It sucks that a bunch of people are going to die, a bunch of good people who don't want to hurt anybody. But there is nothing that we can do about that. There is literally nothing that we can do about that. And I think that that's the major issue, because it's such a moral gray area, because part of you is like, you want to help these people. They're in trouble. They need our help. At the same time, you're making it worse. And, so it's a very sticky situation. And the caveat that I will put there is that I'm a civilian, so I don't know exactly what the fuck is going on. But from what I do know, that's my opinion on the whole thing.
So in those terms, what I'm getting is you typically sympathize with isolationism. Does that go across the board, or is it just with the Middle East, which has become a kind of a death pit and money pit for America?
I wouldn't say it goes across the board. It's definitely a situational thing. I think that you need to have a very specific exit strategy if you're going to intervene. And I think at this point, the longer we stay, the worse off we may get. I think you just need to hands off for a while. Focus on the Islamic extremism here. I think that's the most immediate threat to us. I don't think that the most immediate threat to us is ISIS in the Middle East. Like I said, I get that they're bad people, but there's nothing that we can do about that. But on the flip side, if something was happening and a country wanted us to help, then fine. Depending on the situation, I would have to know what the situation is to really give an opinion. But I'm open to both. I'm open to both scenarios where you say no, thank you, or you say, yeah, we'll help. Like I said, it depends on the situation. It depends on your exit strategy. I don't see how this isn't ending well, and I don't think that there is an end in sight. Because at the same time, you also have to realize that the people who are good people are also not Westerners who are going to implement a democracy. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Honey Badger Radio did a thing recently that I responded to. It was a couple months ago now, where they said that women in Islam benefit because they're manipulative and stuff like that. And I disagree with that, very much so. I don't think that they're manipulative. I don't think that they just want to be lazy. But what I do think is that Islam is their religion. So they do agree with these social situations. I don't think they're doing it to leech off men, but I do think that they genuinely believe it. And so even if these good people who don't want to hurt anybody believe this stuff, you can't be like, by the way, now you're a free Western democracy. They're like, haha, no. So there's just no real end in sight. You can't force people to evolve, in my opinion. And so, it just depends on the situation. But I think in this situation, it's time to just accept defeat and let it go.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a free democracy as long as you vote for me 99% of the time. And then after that, I'm probably going to start beheading people. Now we've got a few moments left for questions from the room. Do we have any? We're good?
No, I guess I'll ask one.
All right, we got one from Peter.
So what's your overall perspective on Donald Trump himself as the president-elect of the United States?
So in case you didn't catch that, what is your perspective on, or what is your opinion on Donald Trump himself as the president-elect of the United States of America?
So I have an actual kind of a personal story with Donald Trump. My dad has met him, and he actually helped my dad in a business venture in the 90s. And from what I know about him and from what I know about the people who have worked for him, I know that he's a very generous human being. I know that he has the best interest of his employees at heart. I really believe that. And I see that echoed in his policies. I'm currently working on videos about his 100-day plans. I've been working on it for a while. I've just had a lot of things come up. But one of his things is that, with his draining the swamp, he's not just going to go in and fire everybody. He's going to put a freeze on all those positions. So, even these people who are employed by the government who likely didn't vote for him, he's making sure that they have job security. So until they leave or get fired for whatever reason, or until they get a new job or something like that, they have those positions. Those jobs are still there. And so I see that that generosity and that care for things being rolled out smoothly in his plans, and I feel confident about that. I'm also happy that he's already implementing other parts of his plans because he got carrier air to stay in the United States, and I think that that's great. He's being the president without being the president yet. And I've said this too, I don't know what he's going to, I see his plan, and I see that in his life before this, and now that he is sticking to it, but he will still have to earn that second vote for me. I was very excited about him, and every president gets that grace period where you really see what they're made of, and you really decide whether or not it was the right decision. And if he was the wrong decision, and if he does things that I don't like, I will be the first person to tell you. But I think it's a positive thing. I think he's going to do a good job. So that's my opinion on him.
And I find it a little strange that the Not My President people, they seem to want him to fail. And it seems paradoxical because you want him to succeed because it is in best interest.
So I was 11, I think. Yeah, I was 11 when Barack Obama was elected. And my parents they're conservative, so they weren't happy about it. But what my dad said to me when he got elected, he said, what we wanted to happen is not what happened. But this man is our president for the next 4 to 8 years, and we see what he does. And you hope that the person succeeds because it's your country too, even if you don't vote for the person. So if he does a good job, then great. It doesn't matter if you were right or wrong. All that matters is that, from here on out, good things happen. Now, that's not what happened, but I think you should always start with that perspective that, hopefully if you vote for somebody and they're not the person that wins, I think that your perspective should be, I hope I'm wrong, because that means that the country does get better. That means that we do make strides. And I think, and that would have been my perspective if Hillary had won, because now, even though I would have had a much harder time given who she is, sticking to that, I would have forced myself to do it because, it's my country too, even though I didn't vote for her. I don't want her to fail. Yeah, it's against my best interests for her to fail. It's against everybody's best interest if Donald Trump fails as a president. So I think it's ridiculous to hope that your leader fails, no matter whether or not you voted for them.
I think it's also a little ridiculous to think that he's going to incarcerate everybody and put us in death camps. I always think that's strange, especially when other Hispanics come up to me and they ask me, right after the election, like, why are you so happy? And it was like, well, because my guy won. And like, how can you say that? He hates you. And it was like, where are you getting this from?
Yeah, and I think the problem with that is that you're probably like, well, because I'm an American, so the whole illegal immigration thing doesn't affect me because, if you're not one, then you're not one. And that's the thing that's amazing is that, like I said, they have these ideas that, if you're this race and you're an illegal immigrant, probably. which if you are of Hispanic descent, then you are an illegal immigrant probably, or you sympathize with them. And a lot of people who came here legally do not sympathize with them because it's actually really difficult to freaking get here. So, and I see no reason why, if you got here legally, why you would even think to sympathize with people who just invade the country that is now your home. You know, that's like if you invite a black person in and then a black person breaks in and you're like, hey, maybe you shouldn't break in to my house. And then some fat red-haired woman comes around the corner and goes, oh my God, you hate black people. And you and your black friend are standing there like, seriously? That's pretty much the situation. You know, just because some people broke into the country doesn't mean that all the people of that race have broken into the country. The amount of racial stereotyping that the regressive left does is baffling.
Yeah. Well, we are just about out of time. It is 7 p.m. here.
Okay.
So glad you came on to do this. We are with Some Dumb American. I am Isaac Yepes, the recruitment officer of the UTEP College Republicans. Honestly, so glad that you came and did this on such short notice. Do you have any last words for everybody?
Just thank you for having me. Also, my channel just broke 2,000 subs, so, you know, thank you guys for that. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you guys for having me.
Of course. We hope to talk to you in the spring or sometime in the future. Yeah, we will keep in touch.
All right. Bye, guys.
Good night.
Every night.
All right, and if anybody wants to help us keep this going, next or in the spring, we are having Michael Tracy, Oliver Darcy, Cassie Dillon, a really strong lineup coming. So we do have a donation button. If not, send me hate mail. It's cool. All right. Thank you guys. Have a great night.
Bye, guys.